Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Greetings, friends, and welcome to this June 2nd, June 2, 2014 edition of Nightcast. Opening story tonight. Remember, last night there was a hard to say those two words together, a freak sandstorm in China. Tonight, it's as if that freak sandstorm from China has moved over to Iran, where it's hit the Iranian capital.
A powerful sandstorm has hit Iran's capital, Tehran, killing at least 4 people and injuring about 30. Video footage shows an enormous dust cloud looming over the city. At its peak, the storm brought winds of up to 110 kilometers per hour, knocking over trees and damaging windows. Some of those injured were hit by falling objects carried by these high winds. Some domestic flights to central Iran have been diverted.
The state media reported 110 kilometers per hour, 70 mile per hour winds in that sandstorm. I thought I'd just give you the USA equivalent in miles per hour for it. Friends, many of you who watch this program remember a man who led a small but significant church, Herbert W. Armstrong, who was a frequent visitor to the Spanish King Juan Carlos. In today's news, Juan Carlos is still alive, but he's abdicating his throne after 40 years on the throne. He's handing the reins over to his son.
A message from the king to the people of Spain. And what a message. King Juan Carlos telling them he was abdicating to make way for his son.
Today
a new generation must lead. Younger people with more energy, determined to push through with the reforms we need and to face our future challenges. I've only ever wanted to contribute to the welfare of ordinary Spaniards. I want the best for this country.
This was the key moment of Juan Carlos's reign. 1981, and members of the Spanish Armed Forces seized control of the country's parliament. They're hoping to revive the authoritarianism of the late General Franco's dictatorship. But the young king spoke up for democracy and they were defeated.
I wasn't afraid for Spain because I knew what the rest and what the whole majority of the armed forces and the people in general wanted and really needed for me to do that night.
¡Viva el rey! ¡Viva! ¡Viva España!
¡Viva! The king's popularity steadily rose. After the 2004 Madrid bombings, the royal family visited survivors in hospital. He was seen as a man for the people. But then the recent setbacks. His youngest daughter, Princess Christina, caught up in a corruption scandal, and the king himself criticised in 2012 after a lavish elephant hunt in Botswana, as Spaniards faced the hardships of the financial crisis. He made a public apology. These Spaniards out in the centre of Madrid tonight see the abdication as an opportunity, demanding a referendum on a republic.
If you judge the mood in Spain simply on the basis of this crowd tonight, well then you'd think abdication was going to be followed by a republic. No more kings, say the banners. But the political reality in Spain is very different.
Both major parties, centre-right and centre-left, will approve the succession. But is abdication in old age becoming a trend in Europe with implications for Britain? King Juan Carlos says he's passing the role to a younger, energised generation. Last year, Belgian King Albert abdicated in favour of his son, Philippe, for health reasons. And Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands handed her throne to Prince Willem-Alexander, saying he was ready to reign. But observers here stress there's no way Britain will follow suit.
The Queen will not abdicate. She has no intention of doing so. She made a promise in 1947 when she was 21 that she would serve all her life, and she reiterated that promise on many occasions during Diamond Jubilee year.
But in Spain, the path seems clear. Crown Prince Felipe will soon be Spain's Philip VI. He will now have to restore and transform the role of king.
And friends, Russia, its state gas company, Gazprom, G-A-Z-P-R-O-M, all one word, Gazprom, has threatened to cut off supplies to Ukraine if Ukraine fails to pay in advance for its June supplies. The warning comes as relations between the two countries remain tense. Fighting has intensified around Sloviansk in eastern Ukraine. At the end of tonight's program, friends, we have some video that amateur video that was taken showing bombings on the border of the Ukraine. I'm not sure. I'm going to wait and show that at the end, maybe if we have time, because I'm not certain about the licensing on that piece of video, and I'll have to jump a lot of hoops if the licensing is not in place if we show it, but I'll take that risk if we have time when we get to the end. But 12 troops were killed Thursday last week when pro-Russian rebels shot down an army helicopter. You may remember we showed you that video. In this video, Aaron Hasselhurst from the BBC will explain how Ukraine has run up a $5.2 billion bill. In the UK, that would be the equivalent of a little over £3 billion.
Russia's state gas company, Gazprom, has told Ukraine it's going to turn them off. It's going to cut off its gas supplies this Tuesday unless it pays billions of dollars it says it's owed. I'll put some numbers together for you. Let's take a look. Gazprom says that by the end of next week, Ukraine will owe this, $5.2 billion. It is a figure that Kiev disputes, and quite simply a figure it can't afford to pay right now. But here's the thing. Ukraine signed a contract back in 2007 that locked it into buying gas at this, $485 per 1,000 cubic meters. I should also add that is the highest price paid by any country in Europe. Then Russia slashed the price by almost half when Viktor Yanukovych, Ukraine's pro-Russian, the keys right there, pro-Russian former president, he rejected that trade deal with the EU last year. But you got to remember, he was booted out. He was ousted in February. And then Russia tore up the deal and then reinstated that original price. Now, we know European Union officials, they're brokering talks in Berlin today between the two sides. EU, I've got to say, is also worried about, of course, about the knock-on effect. Europe is still very heavily reliant on Russian gas, and half of it still comes via Ukraine pipeline.
Friends, elsewhere in the world, for most of the last 50 years, Myanmar has been governed by a brutal military dictatorship. Steps have been taken towards democracy in the last 3 years, but the difficult relationship between the country's Buddhist majority and Muslim minority is now seen as the government's biggest challenge ahead of a general election next year. The BBC's Jonah Fisher reports from Rakhine State on the widespread hostility to Muslims, which has left many without access to medical help.
Along the waterways of the Bay of Bengal, conflict and persecution scar Myanmar's moves towards democracy. To reach Chen Yipin, it's a 2-hour journey by boat. The camp is home to 4,000 Rohingya Muslims who fled Buddhist attacks 3 years ago. On our way, we pass a man tending the grave of his 2-month-old baby boy. 7 children have died here in the last month. None of them saw a doctor. This is why 2 months ago Buddhist mobs violently attacked international aid agencies in the state capital, Sitwe. Offices were ransacked and those providing healthcare to the Rohingya forced to leave. That means there are now tens of thousands of Muslims like Arabana without access to medical help. She's in so much pain she can no longer walk. I want to be treated, she says, but I'm scared if I'm taken to hospital, the Buddhists will attack me. Across camp, we hear similar stories. There have been only 3 visits from Burmese government doctors since the aid agencies left, and no one trusts Buddhists to transfer them safely to hospital.
What's happening here isn't being dictated by the central Burmese government, but by the local Rakhine Buddhist community. It's them who are stopping these Muslim Rohingya leaving from the camps, and it's them who are stopping aid agencies bringing healthcare in. In the past, the Burmese government would have simply acted decisively and forced their will on the people. Now, they say they're powerless to act.
The Rakhine Buddhists are one of many Burmese minorities worried about their place in a country emerging from decades of military rule. At this village, the fishermen tell me that they should be receiving aid, not the Rohingya, who they say have come here illegally from Bangladesh. Back in a Rohingya camp near Sitwe, there's no one with medical training, but if you're desperate and you've got money, you visit this little shack. One of today's patients is a painfully thin 2-month-old baby boy called Mama Rohin. He's given rehydration fluids, but his needs are clearly much greater. We suffer and we die. That is our fate, his mum tells me. There are those who are calling what's happening here a slow-burning genocide, others ethnic cleansing. Whatever words you choose, this is a human tragedy. People trapped in camps, dying and denied the most basic of rights. Jonah Fisher, BBC News, Rakhine State, Myanmar.
Friends, I wanted you to be sure and see that video because, you know, Jesus wept over things he saw in the world, and he did encourage us to pray about the things we see in world events and to pray, thy kingdom come. And some of these kind of stories, they kind of help us put our mind off what we might like as our own personal goals and things in this life when we see such tragedy occurring. And we see, as Mr. Herbert Armstrong said to us decades ago, he said, prepare to reduce your standard of living. You know, I've actually been working for more than a decade, for a couple of decades, on efforts to do just that, to reduce, in fact, ever since about 1980. Let's see, what would that be? That'd be a good 30, a little more than 30 years. I've been working on learning how to reduce my standard of living and be happy in doing that, and preparing for times when prices of food may be extremely expensive by setting up areas in my backyard, and thankfully I have a little field back there where I've fenced off where I can grow things and where I've planted fruit trees. And, you know, just that's, you know, you've got any land at all, you can create a little garden bed. You know, put some either concrete bricks up or put up some boards and put some dirt in there, and, you know, some real good dirt that you can buy at the store. Get some topsoil type good dirt, and plant everything organic. Don't use chemicals on it. And then, you know, learn how to grow things. And you can grow a lot of stuff in a small bed. You can set one of those up in your backyard. Email me. I'll link you up to some videos on YouTube. It'll show you how you can do that. Or you can find them yourself. Just, you know, search on YouTube or on Google or any of the search engines for, you know, little home garden beds that you can set up. All right, friends, I have a couple of stories related to the United States, to Manasseh, and one related to Uncle Esau. And then I've got a couple of stories related to our brother Judah in the state or nation of Israel in the Middle East. A couple of very important stories. But let's knock these couple that relate to the United States and to Turkey out of the way first. In today's news, the United States unveils some sweeping initiative to cut power plant pollution. President Obama has laid out plans for big reductions in pollution from American power stations. The proposal the regulations in the proposal are a central part of the president's efforts to tackle climate change and reduce air pollution. The energy industry will have to reduce carbon dioxide emissions by 30%, as you'll hear in this video, by 2030, with the individual states deciding how to do this. But many in the coal industry accuse him of waging a war on coal, and they say they will fight the regulations. David Shuckman reports.
A coal mine in West Virginia, the top of a mountain blasted away. This is how America gets its coal. A few years ago, from the air, I saw how the mines destroy whole landscapes. But coal keeps the lights on, generating nearly 40% of America's electricity. But it's dirty and blamed for exacerbating climate change, something Barack Obama promised to tackle 6 years ago.
This was the moment when the rise of the oceans began to slow and our planet began to heal.
Today, his administration unveiled its boldest move so far, clamping down on burning coal.
This is not just about disappearing polar bears and melting ice caps, although I like polar bears and I know about melting ice caps. This is about protecting our health, and it is about protecting our homes.
But in areas where coal is a big part of the economy, there's fierce resistance to the plan because of fears for jobs.
We have already experienced several coal-fired utilities, electric units that have already been forced to close.
One justification for this plan is that burning coal pollutes the air that people have to breathe, and the White House thinks that cleaning it up will make more sense to the American public than the longer-term problem of climate change. But as the world's largest economy, the aim is to lead the switch to cleaner forms of energy away from fossil fuels. And the hope is to break the deadlock in international talks on climate change ahead of a major summit next year. And that might be the legacy the president wants.
Friends, we'll keep an eye on that story. The Afghan government has reacted angrily to a U.S. deal that freed an American soldier in exchange for 5 senior Taliban militants from Guantanamo Bay. The 5 prisoners were put into the custody of Qatar. Afghanistan says handing prisoners to a third country is against international law. The U.S. soldier Sergeant Bo Bergdahl is now recovering in a hospital in Germany. And there are some in the United States upset about this prisoner swap as well. Beth McLeod has this report.
Haven't yet spoken to their son, so Janny and Bob Bergdahl used a press conference as their chance to address him directly.
I'm so looking forward to seeing your face after these last 5.5 years. Long years. And to giving you a great big bear hug and holding you in my arms again.
I'm so proud of how far you were willing to go to help the Afghan people.
Bo Bergdahl is now in a US military hospital in Germany. His father said they haven't talked to him directly because he's been gone so long that his reintegration will be difficult. And like a diver returning to the surface of the ocean, he'll need time to decompress. There's trepidation, though, about the news in Kabul. The Afghan government has reacted angrily to the deal, saying that handing prisoners to a third country is against international law.
This will have a negative impact in our country at this time as Americans withdraw their forces. These Taliban prisoners will join the Taliban ranks again.
As the 5 Guantanamo Bay detainees reached Qatar, the Afghan Taliban leader, Mullah Omar, hailed the prisoner exchange as a great victory, which fueled criticism from Republicans in the US that the government effectively negotiated with terrorists.
I don't think what we did in getting our prisoner of war released in any way would somehow encourage terrorists to take our American servicemen prisoner or hostage.
But in Bergdahl's hometown in Idaho, where celebratory balloons replace ribbons of remembrance, the questions overshadowing the deal can't take away from the joy that their missing soldier is coming home. Beth McLeod, BBC News, Washington.
Friends, you'll remember in Turkey about a year ago, police were firing tear gas and water cannons at hundreds of demonstrators in Ankara. Well, a day after clashes on the first anniversary of anti-government protest, it's happening all over again in Turkey.
Riot police stand strong in Ankara as this demonstrator tries to make his point. Hundreds of demonstrators took to the streets a day after violent clashes took place on the first anniversary of anti-government protests. Police used tear gas and water cannon. Around 500 people gather to remember 26-year-old Etham Sarsuluk, who was one of the 8 people killed in last year's clashes. Here his mother lays a carnation on the site of where her son died. So what sparked the wave of demonstrations and civil unrest which took place throughout Turkey in May of last year? Well, initially it started with a small group of protesters who were staging a sit-in at Istanbul's Gezi Park. They wanted to stop an urban development plan from going ahead. However, they were violently removed by police, and when people saw how it was handled, they were outraged and decided to protest themselves against the government. Social media played a huge part in gathering support, and 3.5 million of Turkey's 80 million population are estimated to have taken part in demonstrations across Turkey. 11 protesters were killed and more than 8,000 protesters and security officials were injured. Saturday's demonstrations in Istanbul ended in violent clashes, with a number of protesters being detained. The Council of Europe's Commissioner for Human Rights has condemned the police action as excessive. However, Turkey's Prime Minister, Mr. Erdogan, says terrorists are to blame for these protests and are trying to attack Turkish unity and the economy. Ciara Reardon, BBC News.
Friends, and before we go into some news from today about what Israel is saying about some of the recent happenings on the part of the Palestinians, let's spend a few minutes covering some of the history or profile the Hamas-Palestinian movement. I think I've got a few pictures I can put up on the screen that'll relate to this. This relates now to a story in the day's news about how Hamas and Abbas are teaming up together. They're making some unity that's upsetting Israel, but let's cover a little history first. The surprise 2006 election victory in Gaza was a turning point for the militant group Hamas. Hamas is the largest of several Palestinian militant Islamist groups and governs the Gaza Strip. Its name is an Arabic acronym for Islamic Resistance Movement, originating as it did in 1987 after the beginning of the first Intifada or Palestinian uprising against Israel's occupation of the West Bank and Gaza. Prior to its role as a government, Hamas's purpose was armed struggle led by its military wing, known as several brigades, against Israel and delivering social welfare programs. Hamas is designated a terrorist organization by Israel, by the U.S., by the EU, by Canada, and by Japan, due to its long record of attacks and its refusal to renounce violence. Under the group's charter, Hamas is committed to the destruction of Israel, but to its supporters, it is seen as a legitimate resistance movement and a democratically elected government. That's the way its supporters see it. In 2006, it won a stunning victory in the Palestinian parliamentary elections, sparking a bitter conflict with the rival Fatah faction of Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas. Tensions spilled over into deadly clashes between rival militants on the streets of Gaza in June 2007. Since then, the two factions have remained politically and geographically divided for more than 4 years. Even as you can see them coming together in this photo from today's news, it's almost like the outreached hands, it's almost like the other one saying to the other, I'm not going to move, you come to me. How are those two hands going to get together? They got to keep moving forward there together. But, all right, having a little bit of fun with a very serious story. And again, as I was saying, the two factions have remained politically and geographically divided for more than 4 years, with Hamas in power in Gaza and Fatah running parts of the West Bank. Finally, in May 2011, they signed a reconciliation pact in Cairo, but it has not yet yielded a breakthrough on a Palestinian government of national unity. In October 2011, Hamas boosted its popularity when it secured the release of more than 1,000 Palestinians held in Israeli prisons in exchange for Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit, captured by militants during a cross-border raid in June 2006. Israel holds Hamas responsible for all attacks emanating from the Gaza Strip and has carried out 2 major military campaigns in Gaza since Hamas came to power. Operation Cast Lead in December 2008 and Operation Pillar of Defense in November 2012. The offensives were preceded by escalations in cross-border fighting, with scores of rocket attacks from Gaza and airstrikes against it by Israel. Hamas emerged from both conflicts militarily degraded, but with renewed support among Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank for having confronted Israel and survived. Hamas came into prominence, after the first Intifada. I think I'm saying that right, Intifada, as the main Palestinian opponent of the Oslo Accords, the U.S.-sponsored peace process that oversaw the gradual and partial removal of Israel's occupation. I hate to use that word, in return, but that's the way the news people are putting it, friends. I'm reading a story to you. In return for Palestinian guarantees to protect Israeli security. Now, the founder of Hamas, let me show you a picture I have. Now, this is the late Hamas founder. I want to say his last name starts with a Y. At the moment, it's escaping me, but I think I'll have it in my notes here in a minute. Despite numerous Israeli operations against it and clampdowns by the Palestinian Authority, Hamas found it had an effective power of veto over the process by launching suicide attacks. In February and March 1996, it carried out several suicide bus bombings, killing nearly 60 Israelis in retaliation for the assassination in December 1995 of Hamas bomb maker Yahya Ayash. The bombings were widely blamed for turning Israelis off the peace process and bringing Benjamin Netanyahu, a staunch opponent of the Oslo Accords, to power. In the post-Oslo world, most particularly following the failure of U.S. President Bill Clinton's Camp David summit in the summer of 2000, and the Second Intifada, which followed shortly thereafter, Hamas gained power and influence as Israel steadily destroyed the infrastructure of the Palestinian Authority, which it accused of sponsoring deadly attacks. Hamas organized clinics and schools which served Palestinians who felt let down by the corrupt and inefficient PA, Palestinian Authority, dominated by Fatah. Many Palestinians cheered the wave of Hamas suicide attacks in the first years of the Intifada. They saw martyrdom operations as the best way to avenge their own losses and counted Israel's unchecked settlement building in the West Bank. Now, in my notes, I now have the name of the Hamas founder, Sheikh Yassin, Yassin, Yassin. Sheikh Yassin was killed in a missile attack on 22 March 2004. Now, friends, I wanted to give you that background. I know we're a few minutes over time tonight, and we'll finish up with this story about this. The Palestinian Unity government, the Palestinian Unity government, sworn in by Mahmoud Abbas. The new government has the backing of both Fatah and Hamas. A new Palestinian Unity government has been sworn in, marking a key step towards ending a major rift between factions in the West Bank and Gaza. Now, this is from today's news, friends. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas hailed the event, saying, "A black page in history has been turned forever." The two sides had governed separately since Hamas, which won elections in 2006, ousted Fatah from Gaza in 2007. The U.S. has said it will work with the new government, a move that Israel described as disappointing. Israel insists that it will not deal with a Palestinian government backed by Hamas, which is sworn to Israel's destruction. Following the Palestinian announcement, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Security Cabinet said it would hold Mr. Abbas and the new Palestinian government accountable for any rocket fire from the Gaza Strip. In a statement, Mr. Netanyahu urged world leaders not to rush to recognize the new government. And friends, we'll have more analysis and so on related to the Israeli thinking on this and what the Palestinians are doing in this old divisive faction now coming together into a unity government. The United States recognizing it, Israel saying that is extremely disappointing. You know, in the Bible, God says those who bless Israel are blessed, and otherwise. And the ultimate of Israel, the little nation in the Middle East, the little state, the little nation in the Middle East, mostly Judah, maybe some Simeon and Levi in there mixed with them, but Simeon and Levi are scattered all over the place. But a lot of Judah is now in this little nation state in the Middle East called Israel. It carries the name Israel, much more so than the other sons of Israel, who were the lost tribes, even though they're now found. The little nation state in the Middle East, mostly comprised of the tribe of Judah, today carries the name Israel. And Brother Manasseh letting Brother Judah down in a very disappointing way. We're seeing that in the news. And, you guys in the UK, Ephraim, you are doing the same thing and will be doing more of it, as will Manasseh, as the days go forward into what I believe is going to be the soon coming together of the United States of Europe that's going to kick off that fifth seal, which is the next major event in prophecy. The Great Tribulation, a time of Jacob's trouble, a time of martyrdom of God's saints, a time of World War III, a time of the resurrection of the last head of the Holy Roman Empire, a head who the Bible calls a beast, who will be ridden over and crowned in a coronation ceremony by the Pope in the Emperor's Hall located in Frankfurt, Germany. Thanks to the United States helping rebuild that after the Allied bombers blew it up toward the end of World War II. Friends, we're a little over time. I'm going to sign us off for tonight, this Monday night edition of Nightcast, the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy. God willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll be back again tomorrow night, Tuesday evening, with our next edition of the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Until next time, your host Stephen Lloyd saying good night, so long, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on COGTV.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the COGTV.org video archive.